take you where I think the Lord is taking us this morning. Somebody look at your neighbor and say, God's good. I got a lot to say today. My prayer is that it does not fall upon deaf ears. My prayer is that if it's one little nugget, just one, if you don't like anything, you find one nugget. Just something that will help you. Because I believe in a crowd this size that there's a lot of us that we find ourselves in a place of need and we just need help. I think help is in the house. Richie, I think hope's in the house. I think healing is in the house. I believe salvation is in the house. I believe breakthrough, Nate's in the house. I just see, I don't know, somebody, you've been waiting. You've been in the wait. We don't like to wait. But God's been not only preparing you in the wait, but he's been preparing where you're going for the wait that you've just experienced. I don't know who this is, but sometimes you can move so fast because you don't want to wait that you can move into a place that's not ready. Sometimes you try to eat a meal before it's cooked and it's not good, but once it's all together, it's on time. Y'all know what I'm saying? I want to take you somewhere. Take your Bibles and turn with me to Joshua chapter 6, verse 1 through 22. I know you've been standing up a while, but you're going to just, can I have you stand for another minute? Y'all do know that means just a touch longer than a minute. Let me just say this. I don't know who this is for, but I believe that there's a shout that's shut up in your spirit today. And if you'll release that shout, God will take you into the place that it is that you've been desiring, the place that it is that God has for you. You see, the shout that is in your spirit, Roxanne, is the precursor. The shout that is in your spirit that needs to be released is the prerequisite for the predestination or the predestined place that God has for you. And sometimes you got to shout. I don't know about you, but sometimes we feel like shouting. Y'all going to see something today. I'm going to go ahead and just tell you, I'm not going to be able to finish everything with this, but wherever we finish up, I'm going to pick up with next week. Is that all right? Let me just read to you. I'm going to read a couple of verses to you just to establish some direction, and then I'm going to let you be seated. But here's what it says in Joshua chapter 6, if I can find it. Joshua chapter 6. Joshua chapter 6. Joshua. Where you at? Joshua chapter 6. Right here it is. It's right after chapter 5. Joshua says, now the gates of Jericho were securely barred because of the Israelites. No one went out and no one came in. I need you, before we go any further, to say the word now. I need you, before we go any further, to circle the word now. If you've got a pen, just circle the word now in your Bible. It's all right to write in your Bible. I got all kinds of stuff written in my Bible. Just circle the word now. There is this descriptor of time, now. There is this descriptor of a situation as we read further, now. There is this descriptor, if you will, of a season that is going on in this moment in the life or the lives of the people of Israel, especially the life of Joshua. There is this now moment. Sometimes now, right now, can be pretty difficult. You know what I'm saying? Anybody ever had one of those now moments that's pretty difficult, like right now? Or in fact, let me just say it this way. You could easily add one word after now, and that word is what? Now what? Now what? Now what? Anybody ever had that? That's kind of where they are. But I'm going to show you something as we continue to read. It is God has promised them something, but as the promise is unfolding, the place to where he's sending them seems to have barred them out. So now what? Verse 2, it says, then the Lord said to Joshua, see, Somebody say, see. We see with our eyes. Our eyes is the gateway to our souls. But more than just seeing physically, he's talking about seeing spiritually. Why? Because he says, see, I have delivered Jericho into your hands along with its kings and its fighting men. And in this moment, I believe Joshua turns around and he looks at the walls of Jericho and they're still up. And he's like, oh, God, what you doing? What you on? Because what I see in the physical is walls that I cannot get past, over, through, under, around. But yet God is speaking to him in his spirit. See. Sometimes you got to see things spiritually before you can see them physically. Woo. It goes on to say, march around the city once with all of the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times with the priests blowing the trumpets. When you hear them sound a long blast on the trumpets, have the whole army give a loud shout. Then the wall of the city will collapse, and the army will go up. Everyone will go straight in. There's a reason for fear in this moment. There's a reason to be overwhelmed in this moment. In order for them to take possession of what is theirs, they've got to depossess a people that's already there. In order to take possession of what God said was theirs, they have to depossess the Canaanites. The Canaanites are warring people, but yet the people of Israel have been desert wanderers. Jericho is fortified and ready for battle, but yet here's the Israelites who've not been in battle. There is a moment now, right now, where they're barred out of what it is that God has for them. But even deeper than that, God has now brought them across the Jordan. And once they go across the Jordan, he's just dropped them off right in front of their greatest enemy, Jericho. God, you said you were bringing us in, but we didn't think you would leave us right here. You see, sometimes I believe God will take you in front of your enemy and do something in front of your enemy that will prove to your enemy what God is capable of doing through you. I need somebody to grab that. I think sometimes God will just drop you off right in front of your enemy to prove to your enemy what he's able to do through you. That'll preach right there. But let me just say right here, they're in front of Jericho, the foe of all foes, the adversary of all adversaries, the biggest problem of big problems. But this didn't catch God off guard. This was not a surprise to God. This was something God knew was happening. In fact, God began to prepare their hearts for this moment, this now moment, 5 chapters before. 5 chapters before in Joshua chapter 1. I'm going to let you be seated. Somebody say, I'm going to sit down. Just go on and sit down. But in Joshua chapter 1, I need you to turn there with me. Just back up to Joshua chapter 1. I got to show you something. Because I believe, prophetically speaking, God, who knows the end from the beginning, was telling them where they would be, what they would be going through, and he was preparing them for this very moment. So God has this conversation with Joshua, and he says to Joshua in verse 7, he says, be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all of the laws my servant Moses gave to you. Do not turn from the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. And if you want to be successful, everybody in here want to be successful? Keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written within it, and then you will have and be prosperous and successful. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid and do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever it is that you go. Hang on a second. Notice something here. God says to Joshua, he says, I need you to be strong and be courageous. He's speaking to his identity. He said, this is what I need you to be. Be strong and be courageous. This is what I do not need you to be. Do not be afraid and do not be discouraged. You see, when fear begins to overwhelm your soul, discouragement follows. hold on, I need you to go one step deeper with me. He says, do not be. He says, be very strong and be courageous, but do not be afraid and do not be discouraged. He didn't say don't have fear. He just said don't be fearful. There's a difference between being something and having something. You can be fearful at times, or have fear at times, I should say, but you should not be a person of fear. You can have a lack of courage at times, but you should not be a person who is living discouraged. So think about this with me for a moment, because I think sometimes we take up identity with this thing that God is trying to prepare the heart of Joshua to not be this way, because you're going to see some things that are going to discourage you. But he did not tell him to not have any fear. That would be like saying, I want you to go out into a rainstorm without an umbrella and don't get wet. Fear is going to happen in our lives. Why? Because fear is an emotion. We're all emotional beings. God created us to be emotional beings. So therefore, we're going to experience fear on occasion. Fear is not all bad. Sometimes fear can protect you from bad things. When fear becomes bad is when we elevate fear and we minimize faith. When we make fear the deciding force in our lives and faith takes a back seat. Fear and faith operate very similar ways. What is faith? Faith is believing God's word is real and it's going to come true in your life. Fear is believing what you fear is real and having faith that it's going to come true in your life. Fear is the nemesis to your faith. Faith is the solution to your fear. So God goes one step further. Remember, he's preparing Joshua for what's going to happen over in chapter 6. He's saying, I'm giving you something. I'm going to walk with you somewhere. I'm going to take you somewhere, but I need you to be very strong and courageous. I need you to understand that you cannot be afraid and you cannot be discouraged, and I'll go with you. So look what he says in verses 10 and 11. He said, just go back to 9. I'm sorry. 9, verse 9 says this. He says, have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Go to verse 10. So Joshua ordered the officers of the people, go through the camp and tell the people, get your provisions ready. Somebody say, get ready. Here's this thing again. Get ready. You see, sometimes I think we don't make it to the place that God wants us to go because we don't get ready to go there. He says, get your provisions ready. Circle provisions, provisions, provisions. Get your provisions ready. Somebody say, get ready. 3 days from now, that'll preach. 3 days from now, you will cross the Jordan here and you'll go in and take possession. Somebody circle that. Possession of the land that the Lord your God is giving you for your own. He tells them to get in a position, and then he tells them that you're about to take possession. Position, possession, position, possession. Can I give you the title to today's message? The position of possession. Somebody look at your neighbor and say, the position of possession. High five somebody else and say, the position of possession. Now let me do some work with you. Go back to verse 9. Let me show you something, because I believe this is prophetic. Remember and understand, God is basically preparing Joshua for what is next. And he says, have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous? Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. This is a prophetic word he's giving to him. I believe this because he knows the future that Joshua is about to have. And he knows that there will be things that Joshua will see that will be easy to be discouraged. It'll be easy to be afraid, but he's saying you can't be that. You have to be strong. You have to be courageous. But he says something. He says, do not be discouraged. Discouraged. I need you to understand something. With fear comes discouragement. You take up residence in fear, you are going to live in discouragement. What is the definition of discouragement? Can I give it to you? Good, I was going to anyway. The definition of discouragement is to lose confidence or enthusiasm. But here's the key to the definition. To lose confidence or enthusiasm, or to be dispirited. To have dispiritedness. In other words, your spirit, the core of who you are, changes when you're discouraged. And he says to Joshua, you can't be there. You can't live there. That's a season you can walk through, but you cannot live there. Let me go further with you. Thanks, Jonathan. It would be easy for Joshua, who's about to see things that he's never experienced, because Joshua's kind of always followed Moses, to be discouraged with what he's about to see, especially when he gets to chapter 6. And there is this Jericho, there is this mighty force, there is this thing that is going to happen. And all of the events of his future are certainly, there are unknown things that are going to happen in his future. And it would be easy for him to be fearful. It would be easy for him to be discouraged, especially, I need you to think about this. He's going into a land that he's never been to before, and he's going to that land without any direction, without any instruction. We read the story, we see that God showed them every step of the way. But when they were going through that, every step of the way, every day, they had to wonder how, when, why. There were things that they would see that would be so easy for them to forget who they were in God, because they would focus on what they seemed to not be able to do in the moment or in the now. It would be easy for Joshua to be discouraged when he's leading 1 million+ people into a land, and he's not sure exactly how to lead these people. He's not sure exactly what these people are going to do. Are these people going to turn on him? Are these people going to follow him? Are these people? Listen, it would be easy to be afraid, knowing that you've got a group of people that are not battle hardened, but yet you're facing one of the greatest forces known to man at that time. It would be easy to be discouraged. It would be easy to begin to fill up your heart with all of these emotions, and the more fear that you have, and the more problems that you have, and the more difficulty that you have, the greater your fear grows, the greater your emotions grow. Let there be light. And so your spirit becomes so full of stuff, you become dispirited. Have you ever thought about that? Discouragement can extinguish the very spirit that God wants you to have. Can I show you something? Is it okay if I show you something? All right, I'm going to show you something. If you've been here for the last 3 weeks, you know what I'm about to do. I need a volunteer. Richie, I need another volunteer. Johnny, would you be so kind to do this again for me, man, being you were here for the first service? Come on. Come on up here, guys, on the stage. Come on, right here. All right. Richie, you stand right here. Richie, this is going to be a great illustration for you, brother. I'm going to just go ahead and tell you. Richie, you are, no, you're not. You're the body. You're the body. You're the spirit. You're the soul. I've talked about this. I'm not going to rehearse everything that we've talked about over the last several weeks, but I do need to review with you a couple of things so that you understand exactly where we're going with this. This is the makeup of who we are. We all have a body. Well, we live in a body. We have a soul. And we are a spirit. This is how God designed us. We live in a body, we have a soul, we are a spirit. The most important of those three is the spirit. This is who we are. When God saves us, this is who we become. This is who God speaks into our hearts and our lives and our minds, and this is who we become. Our spirit is what begins to be the motivating force, the driving force, the directional force in our hearts and our lives, because our spirit is in tune with God's spirit. However, the problem with our culture, the problem with every culture, that's ever existed is the body is where we spend most of our time. The body is what we pay closest attention to. The body is what we put most emphasis in. The body is where we make sure that we look good. We're wearing what we need to wear. We look the best that we can look. We feel the best that we can feel. So we go to doctors and we do diets and we do all of these cosmetic things and stuff. And somebody last week said, well, hold on a second. Are you saying it's bad to get Botox? No, I ain't. Don't read into it. If you got a wrinkle, get rid of it if you want to get rid of it. I'm just saying. Ain't nothing wrong with that. But what I am saying is a lot of times we spend a whole lot of effort, a whole lot of energy, a whole lot of just time and money and research and this and that, spending time on the most temporary thing that we are. The Bible says that our body is at war with our eternity. The Bible goes on to say that what does it profit a man to gain the whole world but yet lose his soul? But yet we spend a lot of time checking off the things that we feel like make us feel better without ever taking into consideration how it impacts our soul. Then the body wants to remind the soul of the dysfunction that's in our lives. Dysfunction. I'm just going to write dysfunction. All of our emotions hang out here in our soul. Why? Because what is our soul? Our soul is our emotions. Somebody say emotions. Our soul is our will. Our soul is our thoughts. Our soul is our mind. And how many of you know the battle is for your mind? It's for our psyche. So our body is reminding our soul of our dysfunction, of our problems, of our difficulties. Whereas when we get saved, our spirit, the thing that God has placed within us as to who we are, who we're supposed to be in God, is constantly reminding our soul that if God is for me, then tell me who can be against me. But then our body is over here telling our soul, well, I'll tell you who's against you. Well, your daddy's against you. Your boss is against you. Your co-worker's against you. And the spirit is over here telling the soul, well, hold on a second. God has a plan for us. It's a plan not to harm us and a plan to prosper us. And it gives us a hope and gives us a future. But the body's over here saying, man, I'm going to tell you what. God dumped us off right in front of Jericho. Man, what's wrong with you? That don't seem like a good plan. The spirit is over here saying, well, listen. God didn't give us the spirit of fear, but of love, power, and a sound mind. But the body's over here saying, you must be out of your mind. Have you not seen Jericho? Do you see what I'm saying? The spirit is over here saying, you're an overcomer in Christ Jesus. You are more than a conqueror in Christ Jesus. The body is over here telling the soul, but you really never wanted anything. And you'll never beat that addiction. You'll never get past that problem. You're going to be just like they were, and that's all you're ever going to be. And so inside of the soul, we build up all of these other things like anxiety, our past, our problems, confusion, feelings, and pretty soon, scared you, didn't I? All right. Pretty soon, Johnny, our body looks good. Check. But our souls are wrecked. And we wonder why we can't take possession of what it is that God said was ours, because we've allowed all of this to take us out of position. And it becomes impossible to possess what it is that he said was yours. And you try everything you can. You try it, it doesn't work out, and you try it again, and pretty soon you've got discouragement, and discouragement is all over you, and once discouragement is all over you, your life is limited, because now you are dispirited. Oh, man, this is good. I could cut it off right here and go home. Thank you. That was the plan. And so what ends up happening when all of this stuff happens, Richard, you know what happens when you get this way? You begin to lose value in who you are. You begin to think you're too broken to be valuable to anyone. And then you see Jericho when he says, see, I have delivered Jericho into your hands. And you're like, all I see is a problem. And you feel like because of your failures, your mistakes, your problems, that you can't do it anymore anyway. I need to give you an illustration. Who's got a $100 bill? You got a $100 bill on you right now. I know there's a $100 bill in this place. I need a $100 bill. Somebody give me a $100 bill. I need a $100 bill. Whoever gets it first right here, I'm just going to tell you. I'll take both of them. I mean, Lord, give me that $100 bill. I'm going to tell you something. The first service, it was tough getting a $100 bill. I'm just telling you. Somebody came up to me after that first service because they said, well, I said, man, I was thinking I was going to get a $100 bill. In fact, I went down to a 50, and then finally somebody had a 100. And that person said, well, in the second service, I don't know, you got a lot of millennials. I don't know if you might want to keep my 100. Somebody say, we got it. What is this? What is this? I just told you, it's a $100 bill. It's a $100 bill. Somebody say, this is a $100 bill. This is our currency. This has the value of what? $100. I guess it depends on where you fall in our economic structure, but you may think it's only worth $20. I don't know. But it is worth $100, right? That's the value that it has. Hang on. Doesn't quite look the same. What is that? Oh, it's still a $100 bill? I'll be here all week. Hang on a second. Hold on. What is this? No matter if I crumpled it up, no matter if I stomped on it, no matter if I spit on it, no matter how I abused it, it's still a $100 bill that has not lost its value. Oh! But in this broken culture that we live in, we get to this place right here, and we allow our failures, our mistakes, our past, our difficulties, our anxiety, our discouragement, all of that stuff to devalue us. And so God says, I want to give you an answer. Before you ever get to that place over in Joshua chapter 6, I want to give to you this answer. Joshua, I want to tell you something. This is what you need to understand. You've got to be strong and very courageous. He's speaking to his spirit. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all of the laws of Moses that I gave to him. And do not turn from the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. Verse 8. Keep this book, the law, always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything that's written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. He gives to them, verse 8, put verse 8 up. Keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night. Then you'll be careful to do everything written within it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. I need you to think about this. He tells him what he needs to do to stay strong and courageous. He tells him what he needs to do when he sees Jericho with his physical eyes. You got to revert back to your spiritual strength. He tells him, he said, and if you want to be able to do that, there's something you got to do. You got to put my word in your spirit. Because if you'll put my word in your spirit, then you'll have the tools that you need in order to be what it is that I need you to be. So that when you get to a place that looks different than what you thought it would look, even though I prophesied it would be yours, but yet it's still a fortified city, you'll hang in there because you're being led by your spirit. Good God Almighty. Because there's some words that you are placing within your spirit that will empower you to do what it is that I need you to do. We spend a lot of time evaluating what to put on our bodies, but not enough time evaluating what we're putting in our spirit. Amen. Let me add this back, John. Stay right there. So, put the next point up for me. God's word, let me tell you this. God's word lived is a guarantee of Christian success. Did you hear that? God's word lived is a guarantee of Christian success. He said, when you begin to live my word, it is then that you will be successful. I'm not saying that you will not have problems. You're going to have problems. We live in a world that's full of problems. What I am saying is that when you have those problems, one, realize that you will not be alone. But number two, you've been feeding your spirit. So now when you're going through those problems, guess what's inside of you? The wisdom of God, the solution of God, the word of God, in order for you to deal with what's coming against your soul. Whew, this is some good stuff right here. He said, I'll be with you wherever it is that you go. Think about it. Wherever it is that you go, I will be with you. Your ability to take possession of something is not just knowing what his word says. It's going where his word says. He would not have done this for Joshua had Joshua said, I think we're just going to camp out over here and we'll take that blessing. Joshua had to go before God would do what he would do. Joshua had to do what he could do. So there's all of this conversation, this emphasis that God is having with Joshua on the banks of the Jordan River, and he's talking about his spirit. He's talking about how to speak into his spirit. He's talking about how to lead him. He's talking about what you need to do. He's talking about all of this stuff that you've got to put in your spirit so that you can overcome the discouragement that's in your soul, so that you can be strong and courageous. But his presence is the key in your life. It's not just a Sunday experience. It's an everyday communicating with God. It's an everyday wanting and desiring to have God in your life, in your presence, in your midst. And when that begins to happen, Johnny, it said to make sure that his word is always on your what? Lips. Okay, hold on a second. That means that you are having different conversations than you would be having with the lips of your body. So, listen. Sometimes I think we need to change the language that we're using. You see, instead of saying like, I'm scared, when you say I'm blank. Make sure you're filling in the blank with something that God would want you to fill in the blank with. Because when you say, I'm blank, you know what you're doing? You're making that your identity. I'm scared means that that's who you are. I'm a failure. I'm this. So instead of saying, I'm scared, why don't you say, I have feelings of fear? Maybe you're asking, what's the difference? I'm glad you asked. I'm going to tell you. I'm scared is an identity. I have feelings of fear is an event. You have a choice to make sure that the event does not become an identity. You can't help what happens to you. What you can help is how you respond to what happens to you. So you can make that event an event that you overcome, or you can allow that event of fear to become your identity and say, I'm scared. Which is it going to be, Joshua, when you see it? Which is it going to be, Joshua, when you see it? Because when you get there, what Joshua didn't know is when he got there, he was going to say to Joshua, Joshua, see that I have delivered Jericho into your hands. You see, I think we need to understand that we've got to begin to make sure that our identity lines up with God. God has not given me the spirit of fear, but of love, power, and a sound mind. That's my identity. We've got to make sure that God is for me. If God is for me, then tell me who can be against me. That's my identity. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. That is my identity. When I have a salvation in Jesus Christ, behold, I am a new creation. That is our identity. Some of you are allowing people to call you things that you've allowed to become your identity, and you wonder why you are dispirited. Good Lord, mercy. Can I finish? One thing that I noticed in my own life is discouragement makes you feel lonely. I don't care if everybody around you is going through this with you, you still feel like you're all alone. You still feel like you're all alone. But you have to remember, he was telling Joshua, Tim, he said to Joshua, he said in verse 11, he said, something I can't let you forget, Joshua, I will be with you wherever you go. I'll be with you. You see, you can take God's word and build an experience for one day, or you can take God's word and begin to live that every single day. And God will be with you. He'll be involved with what you're doing. He'll be with what you're doing. He'll lead you by your spirit rather than you being led by your physical side at times. When you go through difficulties, you'll be led by your spirit. This past week, I'm getting close to winding down. Just hang with me. This past week, I will say this. We went a good bit over in the first service. Don't get nervous. It's going to be fine. This past week, a mentor of mine, he sent me a message, and at first I didn't kind of understand the message. When I read the message, he said, God's help in our lives is optional. So I just sent back, what? Question mark. Nathan, I was like, what? God's help in our lives is optional. And I'm thinking, hold on a second, man, I'm about to school my mentor. No, God can do anything he wants to do whenever he wants to do it. What you mean? What do you mean by this? And he sends back to me that we have the option or not to allow God to lead us. We can be led by feelings, or we can be led by faith. And then he sent this. So keep in mind, he said, God helping us is optional. But there will come a time when God's help is the only option that you have. In fact, this whole message is basically birthed from that thought, that process. And here's why. Because I'm trying to get you to understand that there is a big difference between what I feel because of what I see and what I am because of what I believe. Can I get an amen? There's a big difference there. So let me take you back to Joshua chapter 6. This is where I'm closing down, Joshua chapter 6. I'm not going to get done, so I'm going to pick up here next week, Joshua chapter 6. God's there with Joshua. Joshua gets there, and it says, now the gates, they're all shut up. Everybody's barred out. We can't get in. God, what in the world now? I mean, you sent us here. Why are we here? And then God speaks to his spirit. He says, see, I have delivered Jericho into your hands. He's speaking into his spirit using the past tense. Hold on a second. He's speaking into his future using the past tense. Only God can call things that are not as though they are. He's telling him, look, what you see is a fortified city, but what I see is you guys are already on the inside. What you see is a fortified city that there's no way in or around or under or over, but what I see is crumbled down walls and you taking possession of what I told you was yours. All you have to do is make sure that you are in position. What I see is something I don't fully understand, but what you need to know is the enemy will use what you see to discourage you. But God is telling Joshua, what I need you to do is use your faith as the ticket to your admission to what it is that I am going to do in your life. Some of you need to begin to rise up in your spirit and understand that God is about to see, I have delivered you. He's going to do things in your life. You see, you got to make sure that your mouth lines up with his word. You got to make sure that your lips line up with his word, because that's what determines your steps. You want to take possession? You better make sure you're in position. A lot of stuff happening here. But I got to move. Somebody say, I got to move. Go to verse 3. So then God says, here's what I want you to do. I want you to march around the city. Once with all of the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark. On the 7th day, I want you to march around the city 7 times with the priests blowing the trumpets. When you hear them sound a long blast on the trumpets, have the whole army give a loud shout. Then the wall of the city will collapse and the army will go up and everyone will go straight in. Hold on a second. Verse 7, put verse 7 up. And he ordered the army advance, march around the city. Go back to verse 6. So Joshua, son of Nun, called the priests together. Go back to verse 5. When you hear them, so watch this. In between 5 and 6, now Joshua is no longer having a discussion. Hang on here for a second, because this is where it gets good. A discussion. God's having a discussion with Joshua. There is a discussion. Remember over in chapter 1, verse 8, he said to keep my word on your lips. There's a discussion. There is a discussion between God and Joshua's spirit. This is what I need you to do. Listen, some of you need to have a discussion. Some of you need to begin to take hold of your soul, the things that are not going right, and say, but hold on, I'm not where I want to be, but I am a lot further down the road than where I used to be. I know I may not be fully restored, but I know I'm heading to a place of restoration. I know you need to begin to have a discussion. But then he said, I want you to march around the city. And just as soon as he tells him, Johnny, to march around the city, Joshua goes and turns to the people and said, okay, I had a conversation with God. Here's what you got to do. You got to march. The prophecy that he gave to him in chapter 1 is, I'm going to be with you, but you got to place your feet. He said, I'm going to be with you everywhere you step, everywhere you go. And now what are they having to do? March. They've got to do what he said in verse 1 in order for chapter 6 to come out, to take possession. They've got to be in the right position. The position he's saying is use your feet, walk. Okay, now hold on a second. I began to think about marching. And do you know, if you got 3 people that are marching, body, soul, and spirit, in order for them to march and to go to the same place, somebody's got to take control. Or else they're going to all go wherever they want to go. In other words, in order to march, you've got to be in unison. Johnny, can you lead this group? Lead this group, man. Y'all going to march. Y'all got to listen to him. He's going to show you what to do. He's going to show you, and then you're going to march across the front of this thing side by side. He's going to show you. Johnny's saying left, and some of them are going that right step. You know, they're just trying to. And Richie's in the back going, hang on a second. Richie's my buddy, man. I love Richie. Keep going all the way to that wall over there. I need you to grab the visual image here. I need you to grab the visual image. In order for Joshua to do what it is that he needed to do, he had to believe what it was God told him to do. He had to push back fear. He had to push back discouragement. And he had to hold on to what it was that God said. You see, he had to get in a position. Y'all stop in the front and turn around and face the audience. He had to get in a position in order to take possession. But in order for the men, the army, to march around the city, they had to be in unison. Everybody had to be buying into this thing. In other words, in order for you to go where it is that God needs you to go, who is it that led that march? You got to let your spirit, what God is placing inside of you, begin to lead you where it is that he wants you to go. You know why? Because, you see, fear will tell you that this will not work. But faith will say, I'm just going to get to work. Fear will say, I don't know how, but faith will say, God knows how. And fear may say, I don't know how this need's going to be met, but faith will say, but my God shall supply all of my needs. Fear may say that this is impossible, but faith will say, all things with God are possible. Oh, fear may say, I'm tired and I don't have the strength, but faith will say, oh, in God, he will strengthen me. Do I have anybody in this place who will get up on your feet and be a marcher, be someone who will march in unison so that you can take possession of what it is that God has for you? He said, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid and discouraged. Which one's going to be your identity? Because you got to get in position for the possession.